That was a very catchy song. Was it, really? Well, to me, that was only the that was where my love for for the unique and individual came to be. Hi, my name is Specs Wintergeist, and this is the story of how the Addams family came to be. Ahem. Now we all know how this goes. Gomez, the father and husband, Morticia, the wife and mother, Wednesday and Pugsley, the kids, Thing, the hand, Uncle Fester, Gomez's brother, who in the original show was never established to be, Lurch, the butler, and Grandma, who broke a record for being the oldest woman to ever live. But how did this family came to be? Well, I went around asking, and when I looked up on Wikipedia, I know where this all started. And here we have the history. Charles Addams began as a cartoonist in The New Yorker with a sketch of a window washer that ran on February 6, 1932. Addams first drew the then named Morticia some years later before her first published appearance in The New Yorker. Some sources give a date of 1933, while Addams himself, when asked in interview, suggested around 1937. Media speculation at the time often connected Morticia to Charles Addams, his wife Barbara Jane Day, but he had yet to meet her. In an interview in 1981, he acknowledged that Morticia reflected the qualities he was attracted to, and because of that, his wife's resembled the character. He described Morticia as not patterned after anyone in particular, although I've often thought there was a little Gloria Swanson in her. And that brings us to our first guest. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Charles Addams' widow. Everyone, I give you Barbara Jane Day, Addams' widow, and the inspiration for Morticia. So, Miss Addams, the real Miss Addams, do you mind telling us how your husband got the idea for the Addams? Well, he thought to himself, what if there was a American family that was different from all the rest? I mean, liking everything black and icky and not so sweet. Really? Yeah, I remember in bed he said, "Hey Barbara, what do you think of this? What do you think of this name for my comic strip? I call it the All-American Goth Family, but I was thinking, why not name it after him? That's how most famous cartoonists start." Yeah, well, when he passed away a few years after he gave that interview about the Morticia character, I kind of felt like he was now with the real Addams family in his comic strip. All too common. Yeah, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Now this brings us to where Addams grew up. Here in the old state, in the Garden State of New Jersey, and where his inspiration came. and the story of how the first comic strip was published. The first Addams Family cartoon was published in 1938 in a panel gag format. Charles Addams became a regular contributor to the New Yorker. He drew approximately 1,300 cartoons between then and 1940s and 50s. Members of the family were introduced one by one, with with Morticia first, with Morticia first, Gomez, based on Thomas E. Dewey, joining 4 years later, Pugsley, and finally Wednesday and Fester shortly after. Adams in Adams insisted that Fester resembled himself, plus a little more hair. A Christmas 1946 strip showing the family boiling oil on collectors was received and was later sold on Christmas cards. Outside of the New Yorker, the Addams also published several collections, the most notable being Dear Dead Days, a family album in 1959. The family members were intentionally not named. Wednesday was first given a name in 1962. For a licensed doll collection, while the others were named during the development of the television series. The editor of the New Yorker, William Shawn, prevented any further Addams Family cartoons from being printed after the 1964 launch of the television franchise. And here we are now with a descendant of that very publisher. Yeah, man, he would always, you know, my family never sells out. Really? And do you mind telling me whatever, and do you mind telling me about all the things that happened on that very, very tragic day? Yeah, I would like to, but you know that Charles Addams, he likes tragic, and with anything tragic, he would say that he is a real Addams and he likes it. All too common. Yes, apparently. Well, on that day, the last before the TV show aired, the comic strip was canceled, and we had to come up with something new to keep people reading. Yeah. Oh, yeah? Well, maybe it's best well, I guess it's time we take the next step on our journey. Yeah, yeah, I still remember when I took over the New Yorker. Man, I was really tragic. Everyone loved the family. Yeah, we all did. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury created a series of tales chronicling a family of Illinois monsters, the Elliots, that bear a strong resemblance to the Addams family. These stories were anthologized in From the Dust Return 2001 with a concerted narrative, an explanation of his work with Addams, and a 1946 illustration Addams drew for Bradbury's short story Homecoming in and Madeleine's magazine, the first in the Elliot family series. And here I am now with a descendant from him. Yeah, it was a great partnership. Too bad, too bad Addams went solo, and Addams and his comic strip became more popular than the one he previously worked on. Whoa, really? Yeah. After that, my ancestor fell into a deep depression, which ended up costing him everything. Whoa, that's really tragic. Well, don't worry. I'm making a living for myself now. Yeah, just all too common. Yeah, we all know. So, do you mind telling me how you're struggling? And don't worry, I'm doing really well at the lumber mill. Even though even though things get hard, I could still work things out. Yeah, and just like that, just like David and Goliath, there was some the mighty has to fall. Ahem. Now it's time to see how the Addams family went from a New Yorker comic to the small screen. In the early 1960s, NBC executive David Levi stumbled across one of one of Adams's book in a New York bookstore and realized that the tone would be perfect for television. He purchased the book and met Adams in the Plaza Hotel, and the topic of a television adaptation was raised. Adams had been approached about television adaptations by others in the past, but he was inclined to take Levi up on the offer because of their shared friend in the author John O'Hara. At the next meeting at Adams's apartment, Levi included the characters would need to be named. The Adams came up with a list for the third meeting. According to Levi, Adams had little involvement with the series after those three meetings. He retained the right to veto casting decision and other choices, but didn't make up use of the power. Some rights to the franchise were given to Filmways, the production company for the show. And here to tell us about this show and how and here, as we all know, most of the original cast for the shows died, but here I give you the original Pugsley Addams. What could I say? It was nice knowing that I would be starring in a TV show based on a comic strip. I was a really big fan of those. Really, boy, I remembered. Boy, I remember the first time I saw it when I was a kid. So tell me, what was it like? Well, as the first episode went on, Lurch was the most popular character, and better yet, his actor also played Thing, the Hand. Whoa, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, being a child star doesn't end well. I mean, after the series ended, I kind of went to a downward spiral. And now, here I am, trying to make a living for myself. Trust me, child star and don't end well go together like peanut butter and jelly. Okay, thank you. The 1964 television adaptation brought the series to a much wider audience and was well received publicly. Producer Nat Parton took took a less evil approach to the characters and stories than Addams had in the cartoons, empathizing lighter, more comedic elements. Stephen Cox later referred to as the series as more zany than spooky. The popular series became the ABC network, ran only 2 seasons. No official reason was given for the cancellation, though the Smithsonian Magazine supplied that it was due to an adaptation of color programming on the network the following year. Charles Addams himself was less happy with the series, considering the characters being half as evil as in the comics. and just like and just like that, a classic was ended. And here to tell us all about it was someone who was one of the directors. I have to remain anonymous. Boy, do I remember when the show was canceled. Man, I want to tell you this. In the '60s, things were slow when TV went to color, but after all these years, I still have it. And I'll never ever forget when they had to tear down the house. Tragic, tragic. But that was the start of but that was only the start. Later on, later on, after after a few more years of being stuck in the Munsters shadow, things started to seem good. The sudden cancellation in 1966 also brought issues for Charles Addams, as he faced a sudden drop in income with the show no longer in development. The rights to future television and film adaptations were owned by his second wife, Barbara Barb, following their divorce, and Sean would not allow any further strips to be printed in the New Yorker. He became bitter towards the magazine for drowsying his family. Barb would ultimately remain in possession of the adaptation rights until she sold it to allow the development of the 1991 film. The franchise remained in the popular consciousness even after the series concluded, with the Lurch Dance move remaining popular through the 1960s. The television series was often rerun through television station for years afterward, particularly in Australia. Yes, tragic, tragic. How can a man go? The '60s were considered a low point for poor Charles Addams, and every day after that, he fell into a deep depression and made him bitter towards something his that skyrocketed his strip to popularity. Boy, was that a tragic day. But soon, later on, things would start to look more bright for the future of the Addams family. And it started in a little show called The Flintstones. Hanna-Barbera parodied the show in November 1964 by introducing a family named the Groomstones to the Flintstones. The Groomstones appeared occasionally in Flintstones media into the early 1970s. The studio later animated a 1972 Addams Family crossover with Scooby-Doo, which led to a spawn which led to a 1973 animated series. The animated incarceration featured a new cast except for Flex Stella, who returned as Cousin Knit. The show had good ratings and spawned a line of children's merchandise, but only aired 16 episodes. A plot was also produced that that year for a new live action series entitled The Addams Family Funhouse, using a different cast. The plot was aired in 1973 but never picked up for a full series. Yes, thing, things just got more tragic. I mean, after the Addams regained popularity, there was originally going to be a spin off, but apparently, you know the saying, you can only capture lightning in a bottle once. Yes, I know. I directed a plot that made. I directed a plot that bombed, but you have to know that deep down, I was hoping this would resurrect the Addams family, but apparently, you know that I'll never. In that, I just feel like we can never capture lightning in a bottle again. That was until a few years later. A 1977 special, Halloween with the new Addams Family, reunited most of the original cast from the 1964 series, with Blossom Rock absent due to her health. The made-for-TV movie faced issues during production and was poorly received. It was shot using a house set that had been constructed for the horror film Ben, Ben, which didn't resemble the original Addams mansion and caused technical issues with lighting. The film was widely criticized for the script, direction, and the performances of some actors. Jackie Conan, in particular, was recovering from a mild stroke during filming. Don't even get me started on that. Man, man, I remember having an allergic reaction to the Lurch makeup. And I do remember them causing a fire and making and the house burned down. Well, I have to say, good thing the new Addams family failed, because if that got picked up, boy, he'll wouldn't do well with fans of the original. And now, even though the even though things weren't looking good in the 70s for the creepy kooky family, there was still hope for them. There was still hope for them overseas. Charles Addams married Marilyn Matthews Miller in 1981 in the Addams family themed cemetery ceremony conducted in a cemetery. Filmways, the production company of the 1964 series, was holder of some franchise's rights, was purchased in 1982 by Orion Pictures. The 1987 retirement of William Shawn allowed a brief return of the cartoons to the New Yorker, though Addams died only a year later. While eagerly insecting in the United States, the franchise did, however, see a wave of popularity in Australia, brought on by widely watched reruns on TNC9. New merchandise was released in Australia, and a Morticia boutique dress shop opened in the Melbourne in 1988. A satellite-linked interview with surviving members of the original cast was also aired on Australian television. A man quoted by Cox created the tone of the Addams family for it to for its success in 1980s Australia. Nothing that the characters were less American than the Munsters, and that Australians had a different lifestyle. Austin reprised his role as Gomez for a for a 1989 episode of Nick at Night sitcom Zone, in which he introduced reruns of the show for a 2-hour programming block. A 1989 video game, Fester's Quest, was developed by Sunshaft and is now considered among the worst games of all time. To promote the game, some black and white adverts were filmed using the characters. Yes, it's really not that hard to be dangerous in a place where everything wants you dead. I remember when my dad my I remember when my dad first saw the Addams family. They were really getting popular. Yes, they were. And tell me, what was it like to know that there was what was it like knowing that there was a family that made you feel comfortable in a place where you feel like everything wants to kill you? Well, if anything, if anything, I knew how to be brave because of them. Yep, yep. In 1980s, they skyrocketed, but that gives us to then that brings us to the 90s, where they spawned 2 successful films. But little did they know that originally a horror movie character was going to play the uncle. The head of production at 20th Century Fox, Scott Rudin, pitched an Addams Family film, but Fox did not have the rights to the franchise. The rights were at the time split between 2 parties: the late Addams' second wife, Barbara Barb, and Orin Pictures. The latter were in possession of film rights, in particular after purchasing Filmways in 1982. Fox attempted to purchase those rights but failed, as Oren had plans for a new TV series. The studio's plans were changed. However, after Barb sold her rights to Oren, and the studio brought Rudin on board to produce a film, Charlene Thompson and Larry Wilson wrote a script and faced many rewrites early on. Tim Burton was considered for director, but the role ultimately went to Barry Sonnenfeld. The film featured a new cast: Blossom Rack, Grandma, having died in 1978, Ted Cassidy, Lurch in 1979, Charlie Jones, Morticia in 1983, Jackie Conan, Fester in 1984. Production on the film was troubled, with Sunfield blacking out on set and a burst blood vessel on Rule Julie's eye father delaying the shoot. Director of photography Owen Rosalind quit the production 3 months from completion, forcing Sonnenfeld to take on the role in addition to his exhausting responsibilities. Oren faced financial issues and sold the project, the Addams Family, rights to Paramount mid-production. Though the deal did not include overseas home media, which harmed description after release, Oren retained those rights passed to more Metro Goodwin Mayer when the studio was brought out in 1997. Now, you're probably asking, why did the Master of Horror turn down the role? Well, later on, well, how, I brought him here so he could tell us why. Tell me, Mr. Burden, why did you turn down directing it? I mean, everything gothic is your style, and I heard you were an outcast growing up. Yes, I was, but I just didn't see the Addams family as my style. I wanted it to be more gothic. I mean, there was going to be a deleted scene of Gomez shooting a bird from the sky and taking it down with him, and taking it into the house with him. Whoa, really? Apparently so. Wow, you never told me that. Wow, you know, you are famous for your stop motion films. Yes, that's what I wanted it to be. Stop motion, but apparently I just couldn't do it. You know, creative differences. Yes, I know. Well, good. It's a good thing I'm making a documentary on this. Wow, you really do know how. But little? Yeah. Oh, and you know, Mr. Burden, if you wanted to, you could have directed the second film. It had everything you would like in it. Whoa, really? Mm-hmm. And just like that, it's time to get to the second round of lightning in a bottle. While the 1991 film received mixed reviews from critics, it performed responsibly well at the box office despite its production issues. A second film in 1993, Addams Family Values, was highly regarded by critics but performed poorly at the box office unexpectedly and earned less than half in review of its predecessor. This and the sudden death of Julia in 1994 prevented Sonnenfeld from producing future films. Both films received nominations for Academy Awards, BAFTA Awards, and Hugo Awards. For her role as Morticia, Angelica Houston was twice nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress, and Raul Julia as Gomez, Christina Ricci as Wednesday, Christopher Lloyd as Fester, and John Cusack as Fester's wife Debbie Jelinski in the sequel, received multiple Saturn Awards and American Comedy Awards nominations for their portrayals. Yes, all too common. You know the saying, you can only capture lightning in a bottle once, but apparently that's what the sequel to The Addams Family failed to do. And here to talk with me now is someone who was originally going to play Uncle Fester. Yes, I know I wanted to do the role, but that would mean I'll have to shave my head and put on weight. And I don't want to do that. Apparently so. But later on, you want to play Hannibal Lecter, Mr. Hawkins. How does that feel? Why, okay, to be honest, I kind of sort of regret turning down the role. Really? Why that? Because like Mr. Burton, the previous guy you interviewed, I regret taking down the role. Tragic. But later on, the film would be so successful that the things would look up again. Following the wave of interest in the franchise, a 1992 animated television series notably saw John Austin reprise his role as Gomez almost 30 years after his first appearance in the role in 1964. It was nominated for 4 Daytime Emmy Awards, including for Austin. That year, Pinball Machine, based on the franchise, was also released, featuring original voice acting from Julia and Houston as Gomez and Morticia. It went on to become the highest selling pinball machine of all time at over 20,000 units. And just like that, a pinball machine saved the franchise from dipping down. And later on, things would start to get better for them. I still remember it like it was yesterday. A direct-to-video film, The Addams Family Reunion, produced by Staben Entertainment in 1998, featured the return of Carl Stushin as Cyril Koshian as Lurch, but was otherwise unrelated to the Sunfunk films. It was very poorly received. The film was intended as a plot for a Canadian-produced live-action series, and the new Addams Family, made with mostly different cast and airing the following year. Austin, then in his late 60s, returned as Grandpa Addams in the TV series rather than Gomez, who was played by Glenn Tano. The series concluded after a single season in 1999. A video game adaptation of the new Addams Family was released in 2001 for the Game Boy Color. Tisk, tisk, tisk. But yet another failed attempt to revive the Addams Family. But yet, even though Addams was no longer with us at the time, we all know that he'll still be living in our hearts and on stage, because later on there would be something that would help get better, but then get down. In 2007, Elephant Eye Theatrical announced that they had obtained the rights to a musical adaptation of the comic series, which at the time were held by the T. and Charles Addams Foundation. After a tryout in Chicago in 2009, the musical was performed on Broadway in 2010, and therefore in a sequence of national tours until 2021. Yes, even though things started to look good, eventually tragedy will have to strike, because apparently the year before wasn't so good. The rights to the franchise were purchased by Illumination Entertainment in 2010, and the studio shortly announced a Tim Burton stop-motion lead film. However, Burton withdrew his project in 2013 over a discussion to use computer animation rather than stop-motion as he had intended. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer acquired the remaining rights and announced a computer-animated film the same year, and engineered into production in the late 2010s. Unlike the Burton version, this would use 3D computer animation. The film was eventually released in 2019 to a moderate box office reception. A sequel released in 2021 amid the COVID-19 pandemic was far less successful. The first film received mixed audience reception, and the second film received negative audience reception, with the two films scoring 45% and 9 and 28 on Review Resignation website Rotten Tomatoes retrospectively. And with all those mixed reviews, it was all over. The end of the Addamses for good. Until after the pandemic, when things started to turn for the better for them, with the little help from a little Netflix series based on the middle of the week. Miles Miller and Alfred Gove began work on a live-action spin-off series entitled Wednesday in 2019. Fascinated by MGM, the writer's room for the series took place during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and was so constructed remotely. The project was formally announced in 2020, with Byrne as executive producer. The series was released in 2022 to critically acclaim. Amazon purchased MGM in 2021, which it turns means that the Addams family rights now rest with the company. And just like that, a classic was made, and just like that, a whole family was saved by Wednesday. So that's the whole story on how the Addams family came to be and how a massive successful series saved the franchise from going down. I would like to tell you more, but that's all the history we have for now. I'm Specs Wintergeist, and this has been how the Addams family came to be.